Welcome. I am Naomi Fada, and I have been sewing for a living since 2007. And through the years, I have found that so many people have questions or conversations they just want to have about sewing. It can feel intimidating to think of beginning to sew if you have never done so before. But as you have conversations and just begin to process what sewing could look like in your life, it takes some of the unknown out. It starts to become familiar. And that's one of the reasons why I've started incorporating interviews into my channel, because the more that you hear these conversations about sewing and the questions that other people might have or the experience that they might have, the more familiar it can feel to you, and the more likely you're going to gain confidence. So as you hear their stories, I hope that you can relate and feel like the questions don't have to be um, so huge. They don't have to feel so looming. The troubles that you might face when your machine has a problem or whatever it may be, that it's okay. There's other people out there just like you who have the same questions or similar stories. So I hope that you enjoy this conversation with my friend Michele. Welcome. I am so glad that you are here again today. And I have my friend Michele here with me because she wanted to do some sewing in the coming year and wanted to have a conversation about that. So, Michele currently lives in an RV full time with her husband, and she is an empty nester. So, I'm going to turn it over to you, Michele. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
All right. Well, I am a grandma. I have 5 grown kids, 12 grandkids, and I would like to know how to sew. I may have sewn a button or two in my life. That's my extent of sewing. And we, like you said, we are empty nesters and we live in an RV. But with the cost of things, I would like to learn how to sew. And I also have my Instagram page, which is Confident Christian Women, and I have a podcast with the same name. And I like teaching women. This year, the main focus is the Titus 2 woman. So, because I found myself, I am her now. I'm the older woman teaching younger women. So, sewing would be a great skill to encourage other women to do. But if I don't know how to do it, it's kind of hard to encourage them to do it.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, and I just love your podcast. It's always so encouraging. And you have amazing guests. So I was curious, actually, before we get too far, how long have you lived in an RV? How long have you been in the RV?
4.5 years.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah,
That's a substantial amount of time. And when you talk about sewing in an RV, I can see how that's just a little bit challenging because it's another thing and there's not a lot of open space to cut
exactly.
or anything like that. So it sounds like you really have you ever used like a sewing machine before? Do you have a sewing machine?
I played with a sewing machine. My grandmother had one, and I played around with it for a little bit, when I would visit her, but not really. And I have to say that I did make a vest once, and that was in high school. I forgot in home ec. We had to make a vest, but I made a C.
What what was wrong with the vest? Like what happened to it?
I I'm not I That's been a really long time. I
Okay.
cannot remember why, but my grade was horrible, and I don't know, but I remember it,
Okay.
and I really wasn't. I just was doing the class because I thought it was gonna be easy. I didn't realize
Yeah.
homemaking is not as easy as it looks.
And I think, even when I was in school, home ec was required in like eighth grade. So everybody was required like
Yep,
that
8th
one
grade.
sewing project.
Yep.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so I love your thought about getting into sewing now. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with some machines? I feel like that is everyone's first question, and the answer isn't quite as cut and dry as it might seem. So, did you have any specific question about machines?
Well, are there certain machines that are better for, like, pillows and curtains and things like that compared to clothing? Or can you use the same one for all of that?
So the big difference as far as so there's home machines and there's industrial machines. So this, if you turn around behind me, this big thing built into a table, that's an industrial machine that has a motor and an oil pan. And so it has like a motor in it. So typically I'm not like saying to go get one if you're just starting up. Um, but it just does like straight stitch and back stitch, but the power in it, so it goes really fast. And like it has no trouble with slip covers and all of that, like fabric. And but I also sew bridle on it because it's of the speed. So one of the things that I find when people are going to buy machines that if they're not super familiar, so you walk into the store and there's all the jazz, like computerized, this, that, and the other thing. So if you only want to like mend, alter your clothes, sew pillows, hem curtains, etc., do not get a machine that is built for quilting and embroidery. Don't get a
Okay.
machine that's advertised for quilting and embroidery. And so I have this one student right now, grandmother, granddaughter team, and this is not uncommon. I've seen it over and over again. Like the grandmother, like, I don't know, 10 years ago had bought this really snazzy, like probably spent over $1,000 on a machine that's like embroidery, etc. And it's too much. It's like there's too many bells and whistles to just plain sew. And so if one little thing goes wrong, or if you don't have the bobbin in just right, or if there's some little button that's off, then all of a sudden you just like, where do you even start to begin to know what to do with it? So my, for starters, don't go with the cheapest machine. But don't like, because there's some that are just, $99 sale. Like that's kind of too low. But
Mhm.
I would say for any beginner, you can find a very good machine for under three,
Okay, that well,
under
that's
300.
good. That's surprising to me. I was not expecting that.
Um,
So that's good.
and I think that that's what people automatically assume is they think that 300 is too little. And so then they're buying these super fancy machines and it's more than you need. It's more
I'll
than you can
probably
handle.
say, "Hey, Naomi, can we FaceTime?" So
Yeah.
when I go shopping for one, say,
Yeah.
"What about this one?" Because
Yeah, you
this
absolutely can. So there's such a variety of them. So currently I have it's a necky that I use that is right here. I'll show it to you. And this one is a little more computerized and it is a little more than you need, but it gives you, I'm just going to unplug it so I can turn it around. It gives you a little bit of an idea.
oh, okay.
And so it doesn't look super complicated and it has different speed adjustments on the side and a couple of different, a good variety of stitches. So I use that for also like a stretch stitch on a t-shirt
Okay.
or something like that. So that one, the price point is a little more, it's like 600, but you don't need all of that. And so the main thing that you want is you want one that will have a zigzag, which is pretty much every machine, because you're probably not going to go out and also get a serger. So a serger finishes the edges of clothing or the edges of like curtains or whatnot. So like the hack, if you have no serger, is you can do some kind of zigzag. Different machines have different types of zigzag. Sometimes it's an overlock, where what it is after you've done your straight stitching and done the seams, you can go back over the edge so that they're not going to ravel every time you wash them, or it'll prevent a lot of the raveling.
Okay.
So that, and the zigzag also can serve as like a stretch stitch if you're altering clothing or t-shirts that have a stretch to them. But here is this one is a much more basic machine that I'm going to pick up. So this one, this one I got, um, gosh, I think when I first started the business, so back in 2007, because I had a very basic singer that, actually, I think it was a gift when I was like for my 10th birthday or something like that. But it had some quirks to it and it wasn't quite enough. And so this one that I have, it if you notice, it's big and it's a little bit clunky, but I've actually made some really big projects with it. And it literally has an adjustment that is where the needle position is. This is for the straight stitch and the zigzags. It has a buttonhole and it has a length of stitches. And it there's no computer to it. There's none of that. Um, so one of the things that people often think is a machine issue, like their machine is too cheap. Like if they have trouble, you're gonna run into trouble if you're a new sewer. It's just gonna happen.
Okay, that's good
I
to
hate
know.
to bust the bubble. Just don't expect it to like go completely smoothly because as you learn how to put a bobbin in, how to wind a bobbin smoothly, or say you're sewing along and even say you have here, I'll pull out a thing of thread. So back here, do you know anything about a sewing machine? A little
A
bit.
little, a little bit.
So back here is where you put the thread, and as it's going along, every once in a while you'll have like your spool of thread and it'll like catch on the back end or it'll like wrap around. And all of a sudden you're kind of like you hear a funny noise or your fabric is starting to bunch up and then you have to figure out like, oh, where did my problem start? And I think as you sew a lot, like anything kind of like driving a car, you know how to see everything at the same time. When you first learn to drive, it's like you can't focus on the rear mirror and
Right.
the clutch and the you know
Yeah.
and all of that. And then like the stop sign and oops, I'm like, it's just so much because you don't know where to take it in. So like all of those things are what kind of give you a frustration at the beginning. And so people often think, oh, immediately, it's something that I need a different machine. And often it's just we have to learn how to get used to sewing.
Operator error.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and just not even just all of the little things, the little adjustments. I'll send it to you, or you can just text me and we'll FaceTime. But I do have a little cheat sheet guide for like troubleshooting machine, like the first things to think about, like even your needle. So if you sew very much, you're gonna bend a needle at some point. It's gonna happen. It's happened to everybody that sewed ever. And it might be just a tweak. It might be that there's a burr on the end because it hit a pin, any of the above. And all of a sudden your stitching doesn't look right. So then the first thing to check is check your needle. Like just put a new needle in. They're like, I want to maybe $4 a pack of 10. Like, so you can change your needle for, something happens to the needle, just put a new needle in. Um, So that's a little rundown on machines. Does that like feel free to ask more questions about that?
Yeah, I don't even really know the questions to ask about the
Okay.
machines yet,
Okay.
um, but that's at least that's good to know that stuff will happen and it's okay. Like
It's okay.
it's like learning and it's just like, well, yeah. So that's
Yeah.
that's good
Yeah.
to know.
Yes. Um, yeah. And so then if you're thinking about pillows.
Right. Throw pillows and stuff like that, maybe placemats, I don't know, things, around the house because house decor is outrageous.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And you can buy so much at like Goodwill and like remake it or Uh, so a good hack that I tell people, so if we're going on that little tangent, which is
Oh,
totally cool. So for instance, I get people often that will call and say they want curtains made. Not so often anymore because I don't specialize in that, but it's really common for people to think that it's cheaper to make your own curtains than to buy them. It's not. Because the fabric is pretty, at least depending on where you get your fabric and what kind of fabric you want. And if you're hiring me, if you're doing it yourself, of course, that takes quite a bit of like meaning. But often people will think, oh, if I buy the fabric and hire somebody to make them, it's going to be cheaper than I don't know, buying them on the, I
Yeah,
don't
no,
know.
can't see that. Like, pay
Okay,
half
that's
for
what,
me.
because I get
Right.
that a lot, and I'm like, no, it really isn't. But I have, even there's some stuff in my office, a curtain that I bought it at Goodwill for $3 and hemmed it.
Okay.
Like, so it's very not easy, but hemming curtains, just shortening them is not a big deal. Whereas if you're trying to make curtains from scratch and you haven't done a lot of sewing, I wouldn't say it's the first project I would suggest because you have to square all the corners and make sure that your fabric is going in line with the grain. And if you're working with a bulk of fabric, suddenly it can go skewy really fast.
Okay. That's good to know.
Um, but if you have curtains or if you found like an amazing deal for them, or if somebody's throwing them out, I mean, I feel like curtains are everywhere. Like even there's like a free closet at our local community center, and I think there's curtains there because people just, oh, change decor, like you want to change it up and etc. So that's a little 2 cents on hemming curtains.
Okay. Well, that's good to know because there are certain, like, I'm already, for when we move out of the RV into a house, I'm already planning my little rooms on Pinterest. So,
Oh,
the have
yeah,
themes, and I'm like, the living room, I want it to be nautical and beachy, and I'm like, that might be kind of hard to find the type of curtains or pillows that I
right,
really love
right.
that I'm thinking of in my head. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I might can find material or whatever. So
Yes. Yeah, which so it's true. You might be able to just find the material. Or just keep, if you're thinking, oh, we're not going to move until the fall. So you have this time to like, if you have it in your head, even if you don't know the curtains or the window size, but you see something like, that's a super good deal or a good, Goodwill or any kind of flea
great
market or
idea.
anything.
Yeah.
You don't even really have to know the size of the window, especially if you're dealing with like draperies, because there's so much that you can do to them to like you could turn it into a valance. You could,
Okay.
if it's too small, you could add a ruffle. You could
Yeah.
complement it. Again, it's if it's
Right.
a good, if it's,
Yeah.
but I tend to find that I will find things faster when I'm not feeling pressured to find them.
Yeah.
Meaning, like if I kind of have it in my head, oh, I'm looking for this, but I'm in no rush. Whenever, then you kind of stumble upon it and you can like, I don't know, I make a better decision that way and don't usually like waste as much when I'm like not feeling like I have to find it like right now and buy it.
Yeah. I My husband, he'd be laughing right now because he would say, "Yeah, you and your Pinterest." When we lived in New York, we had a couple of extra bedrooms in the house, and one of the rooms literally was my Pinterest room. And he was like, "What is a dead branch doing in this room?" Like, I had everything. I was getting all these ideas, but I wasn't doing anything with them. So, yeah, I would definitely, not start collecting just to be collecting for sure, especially living
Yeah,
in the RV.
true. True. You'll run out of space very quickly, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yes. And so thinking about, I know as you were like moving into asking about pillows and stuff, that would be another um mention is especially if you're newer, m try not to work with a fabric that's too heavyweight, meaning too thick, like because then it leads to like more frustration because it's harder to sew.
Right.
So, I mean, for throw pillows, I would say tr especially as a newer sewist, um, not something that's heavier than denim.
Okay.
So, like some of those upholstery weight fabrics have like a lot of ply, like they're
Right.
thicker.
Yeah.
And that's hard, especially say if you're coming up to a seam juncture. It's a lot of fabric. So that's something to just, be
Okay.
cautious about.
Yeah, that's good to know.
Um, yeah, definitely. And I'm trying to think, did you have any specific questions about pillows? So were you going to buy like fabric yardage and then make them? Or, I mean, you could even, if you're buying matching draperies, you can ch turn drapes into matching pillows if you can't like find the fabric. Like,
Oh
oh yeah,
yeah.
I get this stuff all the time.
Yeah. That I'm gonna have to write that in my little on my
Yeah,
notes on my
yeah,
phone. I'm gonna put that in my
yeah.
notes on my phone because I have a folder on my phone about how to
Okay.
sew before too. Yeah, I'm doing all these little okay because I know that if
Yes.
I don't, I'll forget. If I don't write it down, I'll forget.
Yes.
So I'm
Yes.
definitely gonna write that down because that's a great idea. Like I love that.
Yeah. I actually had someone, I don't remember if it was that they moved or what the exact situation was. But they had an extra, I think it was a whole extra set of floor to ceiling draperies. So they already had one hung in this room and there was enough fabric and I made an entire couch slipcover out of that. I mean,
Nice.
because when you think about it, like drapes are a huge source of fabric, meaning like there's so much fabric in them and it's all straight. It's not like you have to do a lot to get to the fabric to make a pillow. It's like, sometimes people say, oh, well, you could turn a skirt into this, that, or the other thing. But even you talk about a skirt, there's a little bit of work and there's seams that are closer together to get, say, enough fabric to make something. But when you're working with drapes, it's literally like 54, 60 inches wide, and I mean, they could be 8 feet long. Like, so you have a huge amount of fabric. I mean, like just from one drape. Yeah.
So have you when you were talking about the skirt thing, and I was thinking, have you ever bought clothing at the Goodwill, like a skirt that has a lot of fabric, and then made it into something different?
So I see a lot of people online doing that, and I think it's really cool. Um, no, I don't really. So I think one, because I sew for everyone else so much
Okay. You don't feel like you're like,
that
I'm
I
good.
don't tend to do that number. But what I tend to do is I like to find things that maybe they just don't fit quite right. Like I found a shirt that I didn't, it was super cute. Actually, I wear it a lot. I was wearing it yesterday. It had ruffles on the end of the sleeves, and I'm not a ruffle at the end of the sleeve person. But I loved the shirt and I loved the print and the color. And so I just, take it home. And of course, for me, it's like I sew all the time, but like 20 minutes and I can remove the ruffles.
Wow. Well, yeah,
Like it's not,
that's
it's not a, like it was sewn into the edge of the sleeve. So you're just like removing the edge or removing those stitches, pulling it off and then restitching the seam.
okay.
Like those type of things. Or um I think maybe we might have talked about this before, but I'm not sure. Like so I like 3 years ago I started doing some more weight training at the gym. Like before that I was just a runner. And it's changed up here somehow, like it's different. And so I have some shirts and some blouses that I really like that I don't want to get rid of. And I haven't on, they've been sitting in a pile for an embarrassing amount of long time. But I'm going to get to them because I do it for other people. I'm going to do them.
All right.
I need to
I'm gonna catch up with
extend
you
the,
and find out in a few months if you've got
yeah,
time.
I need to either like extend the arm side. I can do that. Or like there's some creative ways to add a little bit of lace so that they have because it's just like the whole when you start to grow muscle
Right.
and you've never had any before, which I never had any muscle before, like then it's just bigger around here. And so then I'm like, I don't want to get rid of them. I really like, these
Yeah.
colors. And so what can I do to them to
Huh.
so I do that far more than I actually go and recreate something totally new. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome though. That I mean, that's you can get real creative with clothing because
Yeah.
the clothing at Goodwill, I don't know if it's like this everywhere, but most of the time here you can get things for $4 and $5.
Mhm.
Women's tops and skirts and
Yeah.
stuff, and it's you couldn't probably couldn't buy the material for that if you bought it
You
new.
can't. And I mean, you can't. And it's hard because it's sad to say in like the world of fast fashion when you actually know like people are making it overseas, getting paid nothing in factories that it's like, and the
Yeah,
fabric itself is, has so much chemicals in it. And so it's hard to even think through and process. And yet, right, when we live in a like everything, the cost of living is so high right now that everybody, you're trying to save money where you can. And definitely, like, I buy clothes all the time at a thrift store for a couple of dollars, and either they already fit or I just tweak them a little. Yeah.
yeah,
But
yeah.
our thrift stores here are definitely, most of them are under $10 for any item,
That's
except for
good.
like winter coats and that type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Um, so I hope that I gave you a couple of things to think about as you start your
Yes,
sewing journey.
you did. I got to go write my notes
Um,
down, but yes, you did. That was very
good.
helpful, and I'm
Good.
sure once I do, I will definitely have more questions. I'll be like,
Yeah, yeah.
maybe.
Maybe once you're in your house and you have the machine out, maybe we'll have to do another
Yes.
recording of like how to process through the machine,
Yeah,
right?
seriously, like, "Okay, I got
Yeah,
it, now what?"
yeah. There
Show
you
me.
go.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Yeah. Yes. Awesome. Well, I'm so glad that you joined us here today. And let us know, where can people find you if they want to find out more about you or your podcast or living in an
Okay.
RV and all of that.
Instagram, Confident Christian Women,
Right.
and the podcast is Confident Christian Women on Apple or Spotify, and I do have another Instagram that I started a December 31st, 2022, and it was just gonna be me trying to be accountable to people and getting rid of excess weight, and now it's turned into a crazy page with over 8,000 followers.
That's amazing. That's
One
amazing.
seriously, for in the past year, and I've dropped like 40 pounds, and I'm still working out and just doing it the right way, slow and just getting it done.
Yeah.
I'm
Yes.
57, so it's different when you're in your 50s, and the way you think about food and your body is a lot different than when you did when you were in your 20s and 30s. But that page now, it's actually, I renamed it today. It's Healthy and Fit After 50. Healthy and underscore fit after 50.
Awesome.
Um,
I will put it in the links. Yeah. And I know I've seen you. I've progressed online and since our last chats of like, really, Lucy, you look wonderful. That's
Thank you.
amazing. Yeah.
It feels so good. That's the thing when you get in your 50s, you just want to make sure you feel good and you're prepping for your 60s because you know it's coming, and you don't want to be someone who's all hunched over, who can't get around, who doesn't feel like moving. And when you got
Yeah.
12 grandkids and you
There
have a
you go.
husband you love and you want to stay active and moving, it's like, no, we got to do
Yeah.
something. So
Yes.
that's why I
Yeah.
did it.
That's awesome. So along that thought, actually, I know I'm still young, but the reason that I started doing weight training rather than just jogging or running was because someone who was in their 80s looked at me and said, "You have to do more than run because you have to keep your bones healthy." And it totally it did. It made me be like, all right, okay. Like,
Yeah, when I was
so,
younger, I was the cardio queen. I mean, that's what we were taught in the 70s and
yeah.
80s, cardio, cardio, and I do walk, and I might do some dancing just because it's fun around the house, like by myself, because I'm not a dancer. But I'll turn on some music and dance just to move my body.
Mhm.
But strength training for women and men, as you get older, you got to do it. You got to build that muscle and strengthen your body. So it's definitely important. So I'm glad you brought that up. And
Yeah, awesome.
And there will be, just putting it out there, it's probably in a few more weeks, but there's also going to be a podcast for Healthy and Fit After 50. And the name's going to be Healthy and Fit After 50.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, that's awesome. That's great. I love
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope that you enjoy. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Michele. I know during the conversation, we mentioned a bit about troubleshooting a machine. So I'm going to drop a link in the show notes to my machine troubleshooting guide that you can download. It'll ask for an email address and then you can download it. And also, because we talk so much about learning a sewing machine, I am offering a super special discount on my sewing machine class. So I'm also going to drop a link there in the show notes to that. So if you need to learn more about how to use a machine, be sure to grab that deal because it is only good for 30 days from the episode air date. And also, I have a friend, Zoe, who just finished airing a podcast episode about repairing and maintaining your machine, which is such an excellent episode. So I'm going to put that also in the show notes.